Verse 735. How, without determining form, and the word here is rupa, can the Vijnana take its rise? How, without the rising of knowledge, can transmigration take place? This verse is in very much the same spirit as the previous one, so if you haven't listened to the previous video, it might be helpful to do so. But let's press on. Our cue here is form. There's something going on, and if we're sighted, then we're presented with a visual panorama. And within that visual panorama, we discern various objects. And if there are people around, or other creatures, you'll discern them too. Perhaps give them some kind of priority in terms of what you're taking your cue from. And so we get sucked into it. We get sucked into notions of an external world, and a me here experiencing this external world, a me here engaging and interacting with this external world. This is how we normally live our lives. The previous verse said, though, when form is not evolved, the senses are not the senses. I didn't actually cover this phrase in the previous verse. The senses are not the senses. This is in verse 734. In other words, the senses aren't what we take them to be. It's rather like the senses in a dream. When you're in a dream, you have your senses, you have your eyes, your ears, and so on. Are you actually experiencing things through the senses? The story of perception, the story of the senses, is exactly that. It's a story. It's a model of understanding. And in enlightenment practice, we must become aware that all of conventional understanding is based around models and not about direct insight into what is going on. And this is what the current verse is talking about. How, without determining form, can the Vijnana take its rise? And these are the sense consciousnesses. Vijnana is being aware of a particular sight, or being aware of a particular sound. And that awareness is understood as being dependent on the sense organs. So it's only when we are caught up with discerning, determining particular forms, that we buy into the story of sense perception. But if we don't go with the discrimination or the determination of individual forms, then we don't buy into the story of the senses. You might ask, well, what's the option then? But if you've been watching these videos, you know what the option is. You know what the alternative is. The alternative is to come back to the attention at rest. Stop the attention flitting around and come back to the awareness which holds all of this. The awareness which holds the ever-changing universe. And this is what's referred to in the next part of this verse. How, without the rising of knowledge, can transmigration take place? The rising of knowledge is this discrimination of external forms, the discrimination of a me experiencing and engaging with these external forms. And the transmigration, well, this has been covered before. What is it that is transmigrating? Well, this verse is very much in parallel with the previous one. In the previous verse, the Blessed One declares that the senses and so on are characterized with momentariness. And this is the momentariness of the attention, which is constantly flitting from one thing to another. This is the transmigration. This is what's transmigrating. We transmigrate continuously into different modes of being, different modes of experience. Just before I began this video, I was a little bit distracted. I was distracted by my physical condition, which is weighing quite heavily on me. I'm seeing myself as somebody who's quite handicapped. At the same time though, my feet are soaking up the sunshine. It's a wonderful sunny day today. And something in me sings when the sun is out. And even then, as I enter into the spirit of these verses, something more wonderful opens up. Wonderful alternatives open up, where I can now come back to awareness. And not just that, we come back not just to awareness, but to consciousness unchained. There's a nice phrase, consciousness unchained. And it's here we start appreciating what is meant by nirvana. Nirvana is being generated. Nirvana is not a state. It's not a place. It's not something that you discover. It's something that you generate. And what's being generated? Well, it's so hard to put that into words. I mentioned a sutra I was reading. It was called the Samadhi of direct encounter with the Buddhas of the present. And that's one way of describing it, or one way of describing the possibilities of nirvana, possibilities of consciousness unfettered. And what I'm talking about is not particular landscape. It's an expression of feeling. This is the feeling of direct encounter with the Buddhas of the present. So, this is where we end up when there is no transmigration, when the attention is not flitting around. Caught up in Vijnana, which is the division of awareness into various sense experiences. So we don't get caught up in that, and we don't get caught up in sensory knowledge. We don't move between all these different realms of heaven and hell. I suppose my physical condition is quite hellish, but my immediate environment is very pleasant, maybe heavenly. I flip between the two, and when I'm not flitting between the two, I can come back to rest. I remember awareness and come back to it. So it all boils down to not determining form. It all boils down to our response to the field of experiencing. Rather than get sucked into it, we relate simply to its presence. We cannot relate to it with our mind. We can only respond to it with witnessing. We are witnessing the presence. And this is pure awareness, pure mindfulness. This is consciousness unfettered.